Well, Mr. Klein, thank you very much for joining us and answering some of these Facebook questions. We're going to start with Cammie. She asks, are there things that happened prior to the camping trip that come into play in this investigation?
Well, that goes into the timeline of this event, but I will be willing to publicly say everything is in play at this point. This is now, as far as our team's concerned, a death investigation, and so we'll be developing everything before, during, and after the actual event of the 911 call at 2:26 in the evening.
Well, what you just said may lead into our next question. Michelle asks, the parents have stated, despite the investigator's statements, that they believe their son is still alive. Is there a chance, even a small one, that he might still be alive?
As far as our team's concerned and the 9 investigators in the room, no, we do not believe he's alive.
All right, Mariah asks, how do we know without a doubt that he wasn't picked up by a wolf and carried back to its den?
In that portion of the investigation, there were certain, let's say, pieces of clothing that would have been either left behind or would have been in another area if that had happened, and as well, there was no physical evidence found at the scene. So, we were able to, through interviews of the rescuers, through interviews of folks that live up there, the ranchers, the people that actually go run cattle out there, and also the statements of the police officers, there's just no evidence to indicate that at all whatsoever.
Lindsay asks, did the parents know Isaac before they went camping? Could he have been alone with DeOrr for any period of time?
I'm just not going to answer that question. I appreciate the question, but that goes into the actual events in the timeline. And as I've said before, we're moving to what we call a prosecutorial phase. And so I kind of need, for the specific reasons I've said, I need to focus on keeping the security around the actual details.
Julie wants to know, if the death was intentional, are there motives that you are exploring?
Yes, the answer to that would be yes, everything's on the table.
Okay, Lisa Marie asks, is it true that Isaac disappeared for over an hour after DeOrr disappeared, or is this just another rumor?
Again, that goes into the actual investigatorial issues that we are investigating. We're not willing to discuss that at this time, but I would classify that probably now as not a rumor.
Okay, how about this one from Melissa? Have the trunks of the vehicles been checked for scent or evidence?
I'm not going to comment on that whatsoever.
Misty asks, have you ruled out anyone as suspects?
No, nobody of the 4 people on the mountain have not been ruled out as suspects. Or persons of interest.
Or a person of interest, okay. Robin wants to know, has the FBI shared their evidence with you, or is this new forensic evidence that you have obtained since you started on the case?
I think it'd be inappropriate for me to discuss anything that we are discussing with law enforcement. The only thing I will say on the record is that we are in active discussions with law enforcement. We have been so. Again, I want to repeat once more. You've got the FBI from up there in Idaho. You've got Quantico involved. You've got 2 great sheriffs that have given great detectives that on this case. You got, not to mention the sheriffs themselves, the guys who sit in the office. I would say this is, as I said before in the media, I would say that this is one of the greatest working operations between PSB and law enforcement that I've seen probably in my 26-year career.
Lisa wants to know, what did Klein mean by saying we are concerned with other information from folks that have come forward regarding axillary issues up on the mountain that day?
What I mean by axillary issues are there are other issues that have come into play through interviewing sources. We can say all the way back down to the timeline, in which I'm not willing to discuss the timeline publicly, obviously, again, because of prosecutorial issues. But I will say that axillary means that other information has been discovered during the course and scope of the operation, both forensically and through witness testimony. So those are still in development. Some of those are still in development. It would be unfair for me to say anything about that further than what I've said.
Lay wants to know, what does it take to force someone to cooperate with an investigation once they've hired a lawyer? Can the court order them to answer questions, or what about a grand jury indictment?
As I am not familiar with the Idaho statutes other than I do know that the state of Idaho can convene a grand jury to hear testimony where a witness would have to go in to the grand jury without an attorney. They would have two options available to them. They would have option one is to give their testimony and tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help them God. The second would be to invoke their Fifth Amendment rights. So the second part of that question would be federal side. Federal grand juries are a little bit different monkey. Lying in front of a federal grand jury or refusing to answer in front of a federal grand jury is a crime, as it is a crime to lie to a federal agent. So those are issues that I think witnesses in this case should be concerned with, as well as some of these folks on Facebook. It could be considered trying to throw an investigation off. And if you're questioned about it and you lie and say, "Oop, that wasn't me," that's a federal crime if an FBI agent asks you. So I guess in a roundabout way, what I would say is this is coming down to probably a grand jury, I would think, at some point. The next question I know obviously from the media is, and I want to answer it right now, is what's the timeline? That's what we call the crystal ball concept. I'm not willing to look in a crystal ball and predict. We take every day as it comes, and we're moving the case along. So, again, what I've asked for is give law enforcement some room, give us some room, and give the prosecutors some room, and we'll get there. Just give us some room.
All right, 3 more questions. Anna Lee asks, I would like to know if great-grandpa or Isaac actually saw DeOrr Jr. on Friday, or if they just assumed he was there because they had seen him on Thursday.
Again, that goes into testimony, and I'm not willing to answer that. But what I will say is that we do have witnesses corroborating that he was on the mountain on that Friday.
Jessica says, why haven't all 4 lie detector results been revealed?
That's really a question that should be directed at law enforcement, both on the federal and state level. I'll repeat that again, on the federal and state level. We are aware of the polygraph tests, and those probably it's in the best interest of everybody that they're not released right now.
And final question from Brandy. She says, what are the next steps for law enforcement and Klein going forward with this case?
A great question there, Brandy. I believe that the next step is, as I've said earlier in a previous question, is that we're actually moving forward right now in focusing on that timeline. We're actually going forward right now through the timeline and through witness testimony and secondary witness testimony. We are going through those timelines right now, and we are either verifying or we are denying what has been given to us before. For example, and I'm just giving an example, this is not factual, but an example is if I say I'm at the 7-Eleven at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then I give that testimony to an FBI agent or a police officer, obviously the FBI or the police officer or PSP agents like us, we're going to go verify that. And so we'll go do that through witness testimony and video. So you can well assume that we're verifying everything on that timeline. And that's pretty much the painstaking part right now, is going through and verifying every minute, every 15 minutes, every second in some cases. We're verifying the testimony of the people that were on that mountain that day, as well as what I've said before, which is the axillary issues that surround that through videos, through firsthand testimony, and probably also mainly through some physical evidence that has been discovered.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Klein, for joining us and answering these questions. We, of course, will keep you updated here on EastIdahoNews.com for any new developments. I'm Nate Eaton.